How's it going, guys? Hope all are doing, and welcome to a brand new video tutorial from iPillows. Today we're going to get into a really awesome pattern that a lot of teams, a lot of big companies or applications are actually based on. And this pattern is really important whenever you try to develop a large-scale application or just learning this pattern. It's going to give you a lot of opportunities. This is called an MVC. So you've been in this case, if you have been hearing about an MVC a lot and you've been wondering what is an MVC, why a lot of people are talking about MVC, why MVC is super important for you to learn, and all the different things, and what is basically an MVC. So starting off with an actual simple MVC in here, or the definition behind an MVC. So MVC obviously stands for a model view controller. So the model view controller, or it's called an MVC, is an architectural pattern that separates an application into three main logical components. There is the model, the view, and obviously the controller. Each one of these components are built to handle specific development aspects of your application. So each separate model in here, each separate part of this particular model, what it does in here, the MVC, for example, the model, it does that specific aspect of application. So it handles a specific data part or a logical part of your application, and all of the three different things in here, the three part in here forms the whole application structure. So it's really super important to actually learn about this model, and it's straightforward and it's straight to the point to learn. It doesn't actually have that much of complication or something. It's super simple and easy to learn. So we've got this diagram in front of us in here. It just represents or gives you the actual pattern and what is happening behind the scenes. So the first slide you see is the actual model, how it's being composed, and it's actually a cycle or a loop between the model, the controller, the view, and the end user, or the actual user or the client, whoever is actually getting into your website. And most likely an MVC model is gonna pretty much be used on a web server. So whatever web server you're running on, whatever language you're using, a framework, for example, you're using PHP with Apache or Nginx, or you're using, on the other hand, for example, Express with Node.js and stuff like this, or any other web server you're actually running through an MVC, is just like a pattern being applied to all of the different things. So starting off with the model in here, the main thing to start off is the actual user. So the user is the main point of this particular model. What the user does, firstly, he sends a request into the server. So you can imagine this as a user, and a user actually accesses your website or your web application throughout a browser. So when he does that, when he accesses throughout a web browser, it just submits, for example, it goes into iPillows.com, let's say, or google.com. It sends that, so it sends an HTTP request method. The HTTP request method goes all the way down or all the way up to the cloud, finding your server, and it gets in there. So it gets into the actual MVC model, and inside of the MVC model, the first handler who takes care of this particular request has been received from the actual user is the controller itself. So the controller receives this HTTP method or the HTTP GET request from the actual user, and it tries to parse it depending on what the user actually wants. For example, the user tries to get some information or some data about a menu, meals, or the dishes of the day available in this particular restaurant, or about a coffee shop or something like this. But let's say, for example, he wants to get the menu or the menu of meals for this particular day, the available meals actually for lunch or for breakfast or for dinner or something like this. So he wants to get that. He submitted the controller. The first thing, he gets the actual HTTP request. He understands what is actually what the user pretty much wants, and he forwards it. For example, as we said, he wants the menu of meals. Okay, he forwards it into the model. Well, the model, what it does is just like basically you can take the model as the gateway or the entry point for a database. So the model is actually the handler of a database. So the controller is going to ask the model to grab him the meals or the data from the database about the today's menu meals. So the model goes into the database, like for example, using MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database or a document-based database, or just simply MySQL or SQLite or something like this, or just using regular files to store your data, which is pretty bad. But whatever you're using out there, it just like asking the database for this particular data. The model grabs the data he wants and he gets it, and well, actually he just goes back into the controller. So he sends it back to the controller. Then the controller, whenever he receives the data and makes sure that everything is working pretty much fine, he validates everything behind the scenes, he sends that data into the view. So it just like works like this, because the model comes first, then the actual controller sends the data or forwards it into the actual view. What is the view? The view is basically an HTML document. So you can take it as an HTML page that displays whatever data you give it to it. It displays that data back into the user. So it like visualizes it and it puts it in a nice structure with a CSS, with a JavaScript, something like this. But the view is just simply a showing algorithm or showing way to display the data on the browser, which is an HTML page. But a view, it's like there's a lot of things can be used in here. You can use a template engine. In this case, you can use a Pug template engine if you have heard about this before or something like this. There's tons of template engines, but for example, we're going to use Pug in here. And Pug actually what it does is just like phosphorates and makes it easier for you to manipulate the data inside of normal or regular HTML documents, renders a specific data it receives like variables, functions and stuff like this, and it converts it or takes everything and convert it into a regular HTML. So take the template engine as a normal JavaScript language that compiles down into a plain HTML document. So this is what the view does. You just like feed it with the actual data. The view gonna finally give you a normal regular HTML document, and obviously the HTML document gonna go back all the way down into the user who firstly requested whatever like thing, whatever menu of meals of the day he just actually requested. The view gonna give him that in a nice organized way of HTML documents data. So this is how we basically actually work with user or controller, a model, the view, or the MVC model basically. And obviously the user, when he tries to request something from the actual web server, he needs to use an API, whether throughout a normal regular web browser or throughout any other API tool or API method like GraphQL or something like this, or any other tool framework. But this is how simply you need to visualize it and you need to use it. Now let me just jump you into a real-world Node.js Express server and to see the main differences between converting a normal HTML or a normal Express application into an MVC application. So let me just show you that. Now here's we've got our application, actually the Express Node.js application. It's just a very basic web server. It's actually running on a localhost 3000 ports. And whatever actually you're using PHP or Go or whatever other framework or web server you're using, in this case we're using Express, so it applies the same thing. It's just like about the parent and how to apply it to a specific project. So in this case, what we're actually doing is just like getting Express application. You should already be familiar with Express and how it actually works. And here what we're doing is getting the request. So on the root web page, which is the main web page in here, so we actually listen for the main web page. For any request comes through that main web page, we send back a hello world. So we can try to go back, go to the browser, put localhost 3000 ports, and there we go. We've got hello world right in front of us in the browser, so it does everything pretty much fine. So this is actually about a normal Express application. Now how we can take this and convert it or turn it into a real world MVC application? Well, this is actually really simple. It depends on you and how you want to structure that. But let me just give you my conviction on what other developers and big, large scale teams uses as, a pattern conversion or for actually creating MVC applications. So here we've got the SRC, it's completely empty. I'm just going to go ahead and create a new folder. So you've got each folder or each parts of it, like the model, the view, and the controller has its own separate folder for it to properly work. So here I'm going to create a controller. First thing, so I'm just going to create controllers, because all of your controllers are going to be put inside of that subfolder inside the SRC. So I'm going to put that right over there, and I'm going to go back in here, create another folder, which is going to be the models folder, which holds all the different models and gateways to interact with the actual database and grab data from it. And I'm going to create another folder, the last one, which is the views folder. Now, for us interacting with these things, and here we're actually doing a simple request which needs a route. So this is a cold route. Whenever a user actually submits something, so he tries to go into the home page or goes to, for example, like he submit into the menu, which wants to get the actual today's meals menu for our restaurant or coffee shop or something like this. So this is a caller route. So we've got to get another folder running up in here. So I'm going to just go and create that really quick. I'm going to name this routes. And here under the SRC, I'm going to create a bootstrap file which bootstraps the whole application, which starts actually the application, the whole logic, and links the three parts together. So we've got to link the controllers with the modules and the routes, and obviously the views, all of them together in order to make things clear for our application and how it actually works. So I'm just going to create a bootstrap.js file, which starts the application as I've told you. And here with the routes, it shouldn't actually be confused anyway, because the routes and the controls are one single thing. So that's why they are not included as a separate part on the MVC model. So because they actually work together, the controls and the routes, this is simply why. Now going back into the routes, and we've got to create a new file in here. So I'm just going to name it index.js. Why naming it index.js? Because it's going to be the main entry point for the route directory in here. So whenever we try to require from the route directory, we're going to automatically be redirected into the index.js. But this being done by Node.js. And for the bootstrap file in here, what I'm going to probably do is just like export a normal function, which is going to be like the main function. I'm just going to say module.export. It's going to be like a handler function, and for this handler function, we're going to take an application, which is the Express application instance, and we're going to take the router. So simple as that. Just save that, going back into the route. Now for the route, what I'm going to take is create a separate function or a separate method and export it. So I'm going to export this. I'm going to name up routes. So it's going to be initializing, or this is the main initializer for the actual routes and linking it with the actual controller. So I'm going to create that as a row, ES6 arrow function. And this obviously needs a router. So inside of that, what we're going to probably do is link a controller or link a route, as we did in here as a normal application. So linking a route is just like giving it the route name. And this is what a controller looks like. So just like a simple callback that does the process of the actual request. And finally, or eventually returns a normal HTTP response. So basically, this is all it does. Jumping back into here, we've got first to create a controller. So we're going to jump back into here in 1 second. Now we've got into go into controllers, create a new file for the controllers. Well, I did that in the models, I think. Okay, go into controllers, creating that, and I'm going to name this, so let me just like meals. Okay, meals controller, which is going to control all the meals that comes through and whatsoever. So I'm just going to name meals control.js. And a controller, what it basically does, or what you want to put in inside of your controllers file, is like a different separate methods that concerns this specific controller. So for example, I'm going to need exports, and we're going to need to export a specific function that handles whenever a user request goes into like localhost, whatever, name of your server or name of your domain name, and you / whatever route in here. For example, he requests actually the menu of today's dishes, available dishes or meals. So we want to actually get that. So let me just go and name this like get menu, or gets meals menu. Or get let me just name this get menu and controller. You always need to append a controller, like the last thing, into the actual controller name to make sure, or to make it obvious that this is an actual controller. And obviously a controller takes a request, a response, and a next optional function. So yeah, this is the arguments. Take it as a normal callback in here. Now what we simply want is he wants to get the menu. So we've got, for example, the data is being actually stored on a database somewhere on our server, and the model only will be able to get this particular data. So we've got to go inside of the model and implement the actual model gateway that will grab us the actual data. So creating a new file here inside of the model, and I'm going to name it meal, so model.js. There we go. And inside of the model as well, in some cases when you're using a database, a real database system, you're not going to create something like this function, because you will use the database API to fetch data, since all of the data is being put it inside of the database, and the only way to access particular data, you've got to use database API like MySQL API or SQLite API or MongoDB, whatever database system you're actually using. But in this case, we want to create our own, and we will create it just like hard coding in here, just to give you a point of how things are actually working. So I'm going to create exports, and I'm going to create a function or a method inside of that, and I name it get meals, or it's going to be okay, let me just name it get meals. And this function, what it does, so this function, you pretty much give it nothing, it returns the list of the available meals. So simple as that. And let me just create the list of the available meals in here as an array. So again, this is not actually a real world example of how Model actually works, because Model interacts with a database, and we don't have a database or a database setup. I just want to give you an idea of how it works. So I'm just hard coding everything inside of a JavaScript folder, or inside of this JavaScript file as a runtime variable and a runtime data. Okay, let me just create in here like meals, and it's gonna be like an array of objects, obviously. So these objects, we're gonna have first the name of the meal. I'm gonna have like milk. Okay, milkshake. I don't know if this is a workshop or whatever. You can take it as a restaurant or workshop or whatsoever. So it's gonna be milkshake. The second thing, the type. For example, I'm gonna say breakfast. Okay, or I don't know. So okay, let me just gonna say breakfast in here, and the last thing I'm gonna name is the price. So the price is gonna be probably $8 or something. I'm gonna copy that, and I'm gonna put this again inside of there. So I'm gonna create another object. Let's say the price is gonna be $20. It's gonna be a lunch something, and it's gonna be lasagna, or I don't know how to spell this. Lasagna, how we actually spell that. But anyway, I'm probably, mistyping this, but you got the point of what I mean. So I don't know that much of dishes, actually, to be fair, in actually English or something. So anyway, this is actual meals array that we have got. Now we've got to put that and send it back as a model. So just to make you feel that we are actually interacting with a real world model, while we're just hard coding everything. Now we've got the meals in here, we send it back the array and everything. Now we just need to go back in here, and we've got to link the controller with the model. As I've told you before, the controller works with the actual model, and he grabs the data from the model. So we can do that really quick. I'm gonna say meal model equals require, and we've got to require that. So just going inside of models, meal model, and there we go. Now we've got to get meals, and we're gonna just do meal model dot get meals, and it gets us the actual meals. And finally, what we probably need to do, just like using the response, we're gonna send that back into the user. And I'm not gonna send it as a plain data, I'm just gonna use a JSON data in here to make sure that everything is pretty much working fine. So I'm just gonna send it back as a JSON data, and there we go. So this is all you probably need to do with this one. I'm just gonna send the meals as a JSON data back to the actual user. Now to make this work, we've gotta first link it with a specific route. So we're jumping back into our route in here, and we've gotta link or grab or require the actual controller. So I'm just gonna say meals controller equals require. And for this one, I'm just gonna go in and require, just going back once and going into the controllers and going and getting the actual meals controller. There we go. And inside of here, I'm gonna just do, I'm gonna use the router obviously, and this is gonna expect a get request to be sent, and which, just gonna be like the menu. So, okay. There we go. This is what we want, and here we've got to tell it or give it the actual controller function. So it's gonna be get menu controller. Is that okay? So meals controller. Don't get menu controller. There we go. This is all you're gonna need for actually linking the actual route with the controller. You've got to give it a reference, and there we go. Simple enough. Now inside of the Bootstrap, we've got to get the actual routes, because the routes are the main Bootstrapper application. So I'm gonna get up route, equals require, and get that. So, well, it's pretty much inside of here. So we don't really need to specify the index or something because it will know about that. And we've got to just say up route, and we pass it the actual router. So it needs the actual router in there. And okay, now for the meals or for the actual router, we're not exporting it, or well, let me just go back inside of here for a second. For the Bootstrap, I'm gonna name this route, and well, I'm gonna just name it route, and inside of that route I'm gonna say route.upRoute, because this is the main method that it does that. Let me just make sure that everything's pretty much working fine. There we go. Yeah, now we need, inside of our main server file in here, we've got to go ahead and include that. So I need to do that really quick. So I'm just gonna say const, gonna require it, and well, I don't mean this. So bootstrap equals require, and I've got to grab this really quick. So going inside of the src and grabbing the bootstrap file, so to make things actually work pretty much fine. And here, let me just get rid of that. So let's just keep it and use our bootstrapper thing. So I'm just gonna say bootstrap. Okay, and the bootstrap obviously takes an app and a router, so I'm gonna give it the app and the router references, and there we go. So this should do the job pretty much fine as we would expect it to be, but we've got errors. Meals controller is not actually defined. Well, let me just see that in a second.